If you're interested in getting into tech but are unsure of the role that you can serve in the tech ecosystem, this video is for you. Now, there's a lot of roles in tech. There's obviously business units, there's obviously other roles in management, but we're going to talk about the roles that are more focused in building the product that is the tech product itself. And the three roles specifically that I will be talking about are obviously the software engineer, the product designer, and the product manager. And I'll get into the differences of what these three roles entail, and I'll use a sample company as an example of the career progression and the compensation progression that can happen with each role. Starting off, we have the centerpiece, the people that are putting in the steelworks and laying in the cement to create the foundation of the tech product itself, the software engineers. Now, software engineers write the code, but you already knew that. So let me speak a bit about the aptitude that you need if you're planning to become a software engineer, or if you're in your early career and you're thinking of switching from some other field to software engineering. First off, software engineers aren't necessarily responsible for deciding what gets built. We trust that decision to management and stakeholders or the founders, depending on the size of the company you're at. And there are exceptions. For example, Facebook is a very engineering-driven company, so a lot of the times at these exceptional companies, which are definitely exceptions and not the rule, engineers do get to decide what gets built. But broadly across the industry, it is not the job of an engineer to decide what gets built, but rather how to build it. And that's kind of where a software engineer's expertise comes in, because there's always a vast number of ways to build something. And some of these solutions will be really bad solutions, and other solutions are going to be more performant, but at the cost of some trade-offs. To start off as a software engineer, what you need to enjoy doing is to creatively solve problems and to have an open mind about the different ways in which you can approach a problem. And this is the main thing that you'll be tested for in your software engineering interview. Not whether or not you solve the problem, but the approach that you take when it comes to solving a problem, how you think when you're given a problem that you're unfamiliar with. And as you progress in your career as a software engineer, your experience will mean that you're able to tell the differences between trade-offs of different approaches better, and you're going to have more approaches ready at the back of your head when you encounter a new problem. Enough talk about work. Let's see the dough. Let's see how much you can make as a software engineer. And I'm going to be using Facebook as a reference for all these three roles that we're going to talk about. So let's look into a few salaries and the career progression at Facebook. So we're going to be looking at data from Levels FYI, and this is a site that essentially lets you compare salaries and benefits across companies, mostly in tech. So let's get right into it. These are the levels that you have to climb in the software engineering career ladder at Facebook. As you can see, I have the software engineer selected in the drop down here, and the levels you can expect at Facebook are E3, which is the entry-level software engineering role at Facebook, all the way up to an E9. And as you can see here, at the entry level for E3, you can expect to make about 185 grand of total compensation, of which 123 grand is base, 42 grand is in stocks, and you're expecting to make about 21 grand in bonuses. Notice though that as you make your way to an E8 engineer at Facebook, your total compensation can start to look kind of crazy. On average, you can expect to make about $1.61 million. Your base salary is going to be about 316 grand, but it's really the stock compensation that's going to make up most of your compensation. And at higher levels of your career like that, it does kind of make sense that your performance is also going to be tied to the company's performance through a stock compensation. And that reality is reflected right here. As you can see yourself moving through E3 all the way to E8, the base salary does increase, but compared to the stock compensation increase, that is kind of dwarfed. The stock compensation increase is significantly faster. Okay, let's get into product designer roles now. Product designers are the ones who are responsible for how the app looks and feels. So for a software engineer, you need to be creative in terms of problem-solving abilities, but for a product designer, you need to be creative aesthetically and artistically. So for a software engineer, the metrics of your success are, does the app work and how fast does it work? But for a product designer, the metrics for your success is essentially going to be, is the user experience pleasant? Because if the user experience isn't pleasant, they aren't going to spend as much time on the app, or they might just go over to the competitor's app. And a product designer's responsibility isn't just determining the color of buttons or the way a drop-down appears, it's really orchestrating the flow that a user will go through as they log into the app and start to use its different features. Now, disclaimer, I'm a software engineer myself, so I can't speak too much about the different skills you need to be a product designer, but I've worked closely with a lot of product designers, enough to know what it needs to be a really competent product designer. So without further ado, let's see how Facebook treats its product designers, salary-wise. So we're here again on Levels FYI, and we've set the drop-down to be product designer, still looking at roles at Facebook. And as you can see, you start the ladder off at IC3 or individual contributor 3 level, and you can make it all the way up to IC8. And right off the bat, you'll notice that product designers don't make as much as software engineers, but you could argue that the job is a little less stressful. At the entry-level IC3 job, you're expecting to make, on average, about 150 grand, and that scales up all the way to 577 grand, over $500,000 at the IC7 level. You'll notice here in the trajectory chart that the stock-based part of the compensation, while it does grow, it does not grow, or balloon rather, as fast as it does for the software engineering role. I want you to pay attention to the salary range chart, however, where you can see that at the IC7 level, this one individual reported that they were making upwards of $1 million in total compensation, where the stock component was close to 760 grand. This is a crazy number for a product designer, which just goes to show that if you have the talent in big tech, companies will pay you top dollar to keep you. Okay, let's talk about the final piece. Let's talk about product manager roles in tech. So key distinction here, a product manager is different from a project manager. A project manager is responsible for making sure that a particular project gets the right resources in order for the project to meet its goal within its deadline, whereas a product manager is kind of responsible for determining what gets built. So for example, in the early days, the product manager for Facebook's newsfeed essentially determined what were the features that had to be built when they shipped the newsfeed feature. Now, a good product manager's career can be very decorated. In fact, Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai both did their stints as product managers before they moved on to become CEOs of these super large big tech corporations. So let's pick product manager here, and let's see the career ladder that's available for Facebook if you're vying to be a product manager. You're going to start off as a rotational product manager at the L3 position, and you're going to be able to move up to a senior director role. And as you can see here, as an L3 rotational product manager, you're making about 166 grand total compensation, of which 119 grand is base, 34 grand is in stocks, and you get about 13 grand in bonuses. This is still less than what you'd be making as an entry-level software engineer at Facebook. And also your salary progression compared to that of a software engineering career track at Facebook is not as great. So one truth that these numbers don't tell is the story of how, as a product manager, you're going to have more control over what the app ends up being. Because remember, as a software engineer, you're not really tasked with deciding what the app should be, you're just deciding how to build whatever the app is expected to be. And it's really the product managers who decide what features should get built. And that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope this was informational. I will see you in the next one. Peace.